Hello everyone. I decided to do a follow-up video to my Ryzen build vlog that I did. Talk about a few things and give a generalized overview of my hardware and my setup and some of the software that came for my motherboard. So yeah, I must just show it off and talk about the build in general. So machine's powered off right now. And I'm going to power it on, and I'm actually going to get to the only real problem I've had with this machine ever since I got everything else straightened up. It's the only real issue I have with the machine. So I'm going to power it up. As you did see there, the hard drive light did engage. The machine is indeed starting up, but over here, nothing's happening. Yes, and we're wondering, wait a minute, why is it taking a long time to load up? What's going on there? Are you using a platter drive or something like that? And I say, no. Apparently, and I didn't know this at the time, but there is a bit of an issue with my graphics card and the system I'm using. Well, I might have mentioned this before, but I use Linux as my primary operating system. And this has all to do with the GTX 1060 and the Linux firmware. Yeah, apparently, because I use Linux and its bootloader, it's causing the system to load a little bit slowly. Now, I have done some extra research on it, and yes, it is possible for me to get the driver updated, as I do use a distribution called Manjaro, and that is what is called a rolling release distribution, which means I could get updates anytime I want, when I want. However, currently the new driver is in beta, and it's in the Arch user repositories. And what basically that means that I have to download it from the repositories, these extra repositories, compile it on my own, wait a little while, and then install the driver and hope it works. And to be honest with you, I don't want to do that, because firstly, it's only one small issue when you really think about it, because the boot load might be a little bit slow at first, but once it gets going, it's fine. And I don't want to deal with a potential beta driver, because yes, the driver is indeed listed as beta, so I don't want to deal with that. I rather use the system as it is right now, all nice and stable, all nice and working, and not have anything else to say about it. So, yeah, one tiny issue, but you know what, it will get fixed over time with the firmware update actually becoming available here in the future. I really don't care right now. So anyhow, I have my ASRock UEFI boot screen here. All my BIOS information here. And there's the UEFI version, AB350 Pro 4 P130.30. And if you remember, though, one thing you're going to be noticing here is I'm using DDR4 2400. Alright, and you remember during my build vlog that I mentioned that I initially got DDR4 3000. And you were saying to yourself, wait, doesn't Ryzen need high-speed, ultra-powerful memory for it to actually do anything good? And the answer is no, not really. There are actually two videos about that very matter right now, saying that it's not necessary. First is from Hardware Unboxed, and I will be referring to his video, and I'll just show off what the video is called, and I'll link to it in the video description. And there's also another video from Linus Tech Talk. He says about the same thing about Ryzen's memory requirements. And yes, it is entirely possible to use DDR4 2400, and it works just fine. Perhaps this isn't the fastest at certain things, like it's not the fastest at video encoding, and it's not the fastest at gaming, but you know what? It just does it. It just does pretty well for what it's worth. In terms of gaming, it's just like running my Core i5 all over again. In terms of video rendering, it's actually pretty damn good. Video rendering is actually one thing that this rig actually does excel at, because I'm able to render videos in a relatively short period of time. I did compose a prototype of this video the other night, and basically it took me about an hour and a half or so. So, very good performance. If I had my Core i5, that probably would have taken like 2, maybe 3 hours to do. To do it in that time is pretty good. As I remember with my Core i5, it would take about over a half hour to compile a 5-minute video, and this seems to be able to compile video quite a bit faster because of the higher thread count, and the fact that they can actually render a video and actually do other things like browse YouTube and stuff like that is also a bonus, because that's one of the things that was really bad on my Core i5, is that the Core i5 is busy processing a video, and rendering one in the background, and things were colliding with one another. So yeah, but ever since I got this up and running and got it working, well, this does a fantastic job and does it far better than my old rig. So anyhow, enough about that noise. I'm going to go show off the various sections of the UEFI BIOS here. So I'm going to go over here to OC Tweaker. This here is how I can overclock my RAM if I so desired. I'm not going to do that because, well, firstly, yes, the latency isn't really high enough for it, and I'm not going to be bothered. I did try to overclock a little bit, but it made things unstable. I think I'm just going to wait for a BIOS update for that to be a possibility, because right now I'm running the standard BIOS that came with the motherboard when I bought it, and there actually is a newer BIOS for this, but it's still in beta, and again, it's just something I don't want to mess with, especially with a BIOS. BIOS is one of those things that you really don't want to touch unless you really, really have a backup plan and you know what you're doing. And I do have a backup plan just in case the BIOS does break my system if I decide to update it, but I don't want to get into it right now. It's just not a bother. It's fine. The system works fine. Anyhow, next tab is the advanced. This is how I configure my north bridge, my south bridge, trusted computing, that kind of nonsense. And I really don't play around with this section. Again, this is where I could probably overclock my processor and tune it up. But again, I don't want to risk instability since the system seems to run very, very fine except for the slow start to boot screen. So, that one little thing, again, could probably be fixed in the later update. But right now, it's a bit of a problem, but hey, I can work with it. Anyhow, next is the tool section. First is the RGB lighting. You can toggle that on and off via the BIOS. Next is the Easy RAID installer, which is very handy for those who like RAID setups. So yeah, this motherboard would be pretty good if you'd like to use a RAID, which is very handy for people who like that sort of thing. Next is the Easy Driver installer, which is very good. Since I did not have a optical drive, well, I have, these things. Yeah, I have quite a number of them, and each one of these thumb drives does have a purpose and a reason to be here. Like that one there, that's Microsoft Windows. That one there, that's Manjaro Linux. That one right there is Linux Mint. And that right there is my driver thumb drive. And I have another one laying around here. Right here. This is my emergency backup, so that if any of the others decide to die on me, I have another one to come in and save the day. So, I haven't touched this hard drive. I haven't done anything with it. It's just sitting here waiting for the day for it to shine, and it does work. So, it's not serving any purpose right now, but it will serve a purpose in the future. So, that's good to have. Anyhow, next is hardware monitor. Now, you notice that my temperature is a little bit high. Well, that's due to the NVIDIA card, actually. Again, it's not being optimized right now, so it's giving off a little bit of heat, you know? So, can't really do much about that, but I can configure my fans, mainly the CPU fan, because the chassis fans are being controlled by the case itself. So, I do have the inbuilt fan controller on my case, so, that's very good to have, but, CPU fan controlling stuff here, that's pretty cool. Over temperature protection is also in this thing, so yeah, it does its job. Anyhow, here's the security tab. Supervisor password, user password. I didn't set that up, and I'm not going to. I have a pretty decent firewall on my computer, and it does the job. I'm not concerned. And I have 1,000 different other ways to keep myself safe. So, yeah, it's all pretty good. Next is the boot subsection, and this is how I can configure my bootloader. Make sure everything loads up and all that. And one favorite thing I have on here is CSM. It has CSM, which is compatibility support module. So that means if I wanted to, I could load Windows 7 onto this computer. Yeah. Maybe not as a primary operating system, but something to have in the background, to muck around with. Maybe even serve as a virus test bed or something like that, because yes, for all account, Windows 7 is kind of dead as far as Microsoft is concerned. They've pretty much given up on it and want everybody to use Windows 10. But at the same time, though, that module there is also very good because I use Linux. Microsoft Windows does have the nasty habit of, wanting to have the whole stupid computer to itself. So that gives me a way to fight back. So I can say, hey, Microsoft, you overrode my bootloader. Well, guess what? I have this. So I could overwrite your bootloader. So, yes, we'll be even. So anyhow, we have the exit. And I'm just going to discard the changes since I didn't do anything. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. But let's discard those changes. And I'm going to boot into my operating system. And hopefully he'll be seeing the ASRock logo. Yep, there it is. And here we have Grub, the Linux bootloader. And we're going to start up my Linux distribution, which is Manjaro Linux, as I mentioned before. Now, before I get into that, I do want to point out that on the back of my box for my motherboard, let me see if I can turn the autofocus off, because sometimes it does activate without my permission on this camera, so I'm still having a little bit of problems focusing. So, are we going to get... Yes, there we go. Yeah, natively, this motherboard does have a limitation of DDR4 2667 megahertz natively, and a minimum of DDR4 24 megahertz for the A series. So I know it could probably do lower speeds, but yeah, that's part of the reason why I don't think the other RAM kit actually did work, is because this does have inbuilt limitations. And again, a BIOS update could probably make it work with higher capacity and higher speed, but not right now. I don't want to do that. I don't want to just brick a BIOS and brick a computer just because I want to get faster memory speeds. It's not necessary. Again, everything works. So I'm not going to try a BIOS that's beta and perhaps can break everything just to get faster RAM. It's not worth it. So let's log into my Linux distribution. And show that off. And load here in a second. There it is. Yes, this is Manjaro Linux. I'm using the Cinnamon Community Edition because Cinnamon is my favorite Linux desktop environment. And, I like its layout, I like how it functions. If you notice, if you're a Windows user, yes, indeed, my toolbar layout is actually quite similar to the one in Microsoft Windows. But this is more of a consistency thing rather than oh, I'm fresh brand new to Linux, I need everything to I use look like Windows. Not necessarily the case, this is just for consistency rather than usability. I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to consistency on a computer. So, my setups are usually quite similar to one another, except for my mobile phone and all that, but even they have some level of similarities. Anyhow, let's open up my control center here, my system settings, and let's go to system info. And as you can see, my operating system is indeed a 64-bit kernel. The kernel I'm using from Linux is 4.10.10-1, and I'm using the NVIDIA proprietary drivers, and overall, except for the boot up, they do work well. So, yeah, Linux does seem to do pretty well on this machine, at least currently. Now, one little comment I do like to make here is that if you use, say, Linux Mint, maybe Ryzen isn't really for you, or if you use Ubuntu or any other distribution that doesn't exactly have a rolling release model, meaning, you always get updates. Well, this computer really doesn't do too well with older kernels, and I don't think Ryzen works well with older kernels just yet. It's so new. And what was happening is I was getting pretty poor performance from Ryzen underneath Linux. My temperatures were especially going up underneath using Linux as opposed to Windows. And this wasn't just a sensor issue. This was actually a real thing. In my Linux distribution, I would be getting temperatures up to 40 degrees Celsius on idle. And even though that's well below the temperature limitation of my processor, that's still rather high. You should not be running 40 degrees on idle under any circumstances. Even under clean conditions, like I cleaned out my computer and all that, and it was still running 40 degrees Celsius on idle. That's not a good thing. So, upgrading the kernel to this one here, the 4.10.10-1, that seemed to have worked out all the issues I've had. Well, most of the issues. It's still a little bit warmer here using Linux than it is using Windows. I'm getting temperatures around 36 degrees Celsius, but that's not too far off the mark as they are in Microsoft Windows, because I get about 30 degrees Celsius on idle underneath Windows, so it's not too bad. It's still a little bit warmer running underneath Linux, but it's not too far off the mark. I'm not going to go throw the blame game entirely at Linux. It's just optimizations are just one of those things that, you have to work into. Even Microsoft Windows does have its occasional little hiccups. In fact, when I reinstalled Microsoft Windows on this hardware, and got my license and all that, I did have a few hiccups here and there. So it's not just isolated just because I use Linux. New hardware architectures tend to wreak havoc on all operating systems. It's a universal constant. So anyway, yeah, that's my Linux partition showed off here. In a minute, I'm going to stop the recording, and we're going to jump over to Microsoft Windows, and I'm going to show off a few things, mainly the software that would come with the motherboard if I had the optical drive. But, I still have the software here and there, and a few extras, so let me turn this video off and go into Windows. See you in a sec. Okay, I'm booted into Microsoft Windows 10. My edition of Windows is Windows 10 Pro. My version is 1703. My OS build is 15063.138. And, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm running on my Microsoft Windows end. So, yes, that is the Creators Update, which actually did come out soon after I made the last video, so that's actually pretty cool. Anyhow, let's refer to those videos I was, talking about earlier. The first one is from Hardware Unboxed, and his topic is, does Ryzen really need fast memory? Guide for Gamers. Okay, that's the first one I'm going to reference. And the second one I'm going to reference here is a video from Linus Tech Tips, and he talks about, does RAM speed really matter? And both of them say the exact same thing. Not really, especially hardware unboxed. He actually did graphs for the GTX 1060, and he was saying that for that particular graphics card, the RAM speeds don't matter. That those things really more come into effect if you have higher end graphics cards. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So, most people, when they build rigs for their test for new hardware, they always think, oh, I want the highest end stuff, get the most expensive thing and run all my scores off of that. This guy does a overall performance ratio for all kinds of gamers out there, especially people like me who, didn't want to spend $1 billion on their setup. I wasn't going to go out there and buy a GTX 1080 and spend over $600 on a graphics card. I wanted something that was cheaper but still can game. So that's why I got the GTX 1060. And for that particular card, yeah, it doesn't matter. The gains I would be getting are actually minuscule. So even if I did install DDR4 3200 on this machine, it wouldn't matter. I'll definitely be linking his video first, and you could watch that. And yeah, he brings up a pretty cool little test bed. So yeah, that's pretty cool, pretty nice video. You should watch it. So anyhow, I'm gonna show off the various pieces of software here that I think are pretty much interesting. Well, I might as well just show this off since it's here. This is the Asus dual GTX series tune-up. Their GPU tuner. You probably have seen this before. Basically, I could tune my graphics card. Currently, I have it in gaming mode, although I've been thinking about doing an overclock mode and see what really that would do. But, yeah, it's a pretty simple tool. It's very basic stuff here. So, yeah, there's the information, the Asus GPU Tweak 2, thing there. So, not much else to see. I'm just going to close it all off. But the next thing we're going to show off is what came with my motherboard. Basically, the ASRock utility here, and it's called App Shop. And I might as well just show it off, as in case you were interested in building a rig similar to mine. So let's open that up here, because I did close it off earlier. Anyhow, yes, it's a little app center, and it's not too feature-rich, but it does a pretty cool little thing for you. It gets you certain things a little bit faster, such as if you wanted to get Google Chrome, you can do that from here. You want the RGB lighting utility, it's there. They also offer a couple slots games, a app charger, so you can charge your device faster, even though I'm not really interested in that. The A-tuning tool, which is actually fairly new, especially for this motherboard, and I'll be showing that off. That's actually pretty interesting utility, and I'm keeping it. Yeah, Google Chrome, which I already installed. Google Toolbar, I'm not going to install that because that's useless. Norton Security, not going to bother. Not important. I don't feel like dealing with it. I have other means to keep myself safe, so don't worry. Anyhow, there's the ASRock XFast LAN utility. I'm not going to install that because, you know what, my internet speeds are actually pretty darn quick, even without a tool like that. And next is boot to UEFI. I'm not going to do that. It's not important. I'm fine. Anyhow, next here is the BIOS and drivers. So if you had any BIOS updates or drivers update, it would be appearing here. So far, I've only had 2 pieces of software come on this, and they were just minor patch updates from the manufacturer, but nothing really spectacular, nothing to set the world on fire, just minor driver updates. So nothing important. And finally, there's the settings, where you could get stuff from your other mirrors. Say if you wanted to change your server, you could change it. So just in case you had any issues with your server, there you go. But I'm not going to show that off too much. Next up, though, is I'm going to show this application off because it's really cool, and it's the A-tuning utility. So let's start it up here and see what that's about. Yeah, it's loading up in the background. Don't worry, it's just having a fit because I closed it off earlier. But let's show that off. Anyhow, yeah, this is a pretty cool tool. It says operation mode right here, and you have 3 different forms of operations. You have performance mode, which basically means overclocking. I really can't take advantage of it because, well, I don't have fast enough memory for it right now, but that could be an option for me in the future, so that's actually pretty cool. Next is standard mode, which I'm running right now, and it seems to do just fine. It makes everything run a little bit smoother. And next is power saving, which is pretty nice for people who want to have their computer use a lot less energy. Now, to be fair though, this computer has actually pretty good energy rating to it. I've done my calculations, and so far the power consumption of this machine is quite low, even with the lights on and everything. It probably only reaches maximum wattage when I game, and even so, I don't game long enough for it to be a problem. So, anyhow, next up here is this little toolbar up here. So a couple features here is the OC tweaker. First feature we're going to talk about here. And I can actually turn my CPU speed up and increase my CPU voltages and stuff like that. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. Basically, I could do that right here on this piece of software. And I could do it also in the motherboard BIOS. So, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I'm not going to play around with it because, again, I don't want to mess anything up. The system's still new, but, after I get everything synchronized and everything ready, yeah, probably will be playing with this a little bit more in the future. But not right now. Anyhow, next up is the system info. Now, it does have to load a little bit first, but it's collecting certain things to tell me what I'm doing here. So yeah, CPU temperature is currently 35 degrees Celsius. Yeah, it's a little bit warmer right now than it was earlier. A previous take, it was actually down to 33, but it raised up a little bit. It's a little bit warmer right now, but it's not too far off. The CPU fan speed is that. I could see my CPU and chassis fan, so if I had my chassis fan hooked up to the motherboard, I could actually see how fast they're running at, so that's actually pretty nice. Next is fantastic tuning, which is a terrible pun, and this is where I could adjust my fan speeds. So if I felt that the fans were not running fast enough, well, this is how I can do it. Yeah, I could tune my fans to run a little bit faster, so that my processor will stay cool no matter what I did. So that's actually pretty nice. Finally, here is the settings, which only has one setting, which is start this when I start up Windows, which is, it's a nothing, nothing to see there. Carry on. But finally here, I'm going to show off the most interesting tool in the whole library, and that is the LED lighting. Yeah, I might as well just show this off. Fair warning to those with epilepsy, there are a few effects out there in this setup here that will probably trigger you off. So if you suffer from epilepsy, I would look away when I say so. So you don't have to look away right now, but when I do, please look away, okay? So I'm going to turn this tool on, and we're going to turn my computer lights on. I did have them on wave because I did a previous take of this, but let's turn it back to its first mode, which is static, which is a static color, which is self-explanatory. Now here I have this little color wheel, so if I put it over here towards the blues, notice that when I change the color up here in this little color wheel, it also changes the colors on the case. Same thing with this little swatch thing here in this center here, so yeah. Same thing with these little sliders, so if I wanted to, play around with this and make it, I don't know, an ugly yellow, then I could, but I'm actually going to put it on purple. Actually, purple is my favorite color in this case. It looks very nice. I do like other colors in this case, but purple seems to stand out the most, mainly because of the white accents. It just does look pretty, it looks pretty to me, but that's a subjective thing. Anyhow, let's show off the other modes. Next up is breathing, and at its slowest, it just slowly transitions into the colors, but I'm just going to turn it up real fast. There was a little bit of flashing there, so I'm sorry. But yeah, random amount of breathing there. It fades in and fades out. Nothing really special there. Next is strobe, which, if you have epilepsy, please look away right now. Anyhow, yeah, it does flash intermittently, and if you change the speed, it gets faster and faster until you have that. Again, if you have epilepsy, I hope you're looking away. Next is cycling, which it cycles through the colors red, green, and blue, and a pretty fast pace, mind you. So again, if you have epilepsy, I hope you're looking away. I'm just going to turn it up slightly for those without epilepsy so you can see this effect. So just turn up that little dial, and as you can see, the lights are getting faster and faster until you get that, which is annoying. Next is random, which it just slowly goes through the various colors that the case can perform. But I could turn it up and make it go faster, until, yeah, the same thing with the last effect. It goes all stroby, looks really cool, but if you have epilepsy, again, keep looking away. Now, next effect I'm going to show off is the music side effect here. And hold on a second, it got stuck there. Let's go to the music effect. It's actually misbehaving on me. Hold on a second. Sometimes the software does that. It's still new, so... yeah, fresh, brand new software. Sometimes you have little glitches here and there, but yeah, this is the music effect, and to be honest with you, this is the lamest effect. Yeah, seriously, even in pitch darkness, this is the weakest effect. I've tried all kinds of music genres, all kinds of things, and yeah, it's not all that impressive. Maybe I'll just splice in the previous take of this, where I basically made the computer blink to the StarSpangled Banner, but it's not really all that impressive. So, here, I'll just splice that whole computer blinking to the StarSpangled Banner about, say, here and here. Enjoy this. There, that was fun, wasn't it? Yeah, it's not really good at that effect. It really sucks. I don't like the effect. It's really lame. Even when you're not doing a national anthem, it's really, really stupid. It doesn't do the job at all. So, next up here, though, is the wave effect. And basically, I get stuck again, sorry. Sometimes this does get stuck. Next up here, though, is the wave. And it just slowly goes through the various colors. Reds, greens, yellows, all the color spectrum that the lights can perform. It's a pretty cool effect, but, it's not my favorite. I actually prefer the effects on the case itself more than the lights provided by the software. In fact, I'm just going to show that off real fast. Just in case you were curious about the lighting on the Fantex P400S. So, yeah, right now I have them off. I can't do it from the software and the hardware at the same time. It has issues. Anyhow, let's turn on the lights. Currently it's purple. I'm going to hold it down. And it goes into the breathing mode. Next is the multicolor. I do like this mode pretty much, and it goes through the colors fairly quickly, but not entirely too fast. So, pretty nice. Next off though here is, off. So, yeah. And that's all controlled by how much pressure you have on the button there, but I just turned it back on and put it on purple. So, yeah. You don't get as many colors with the inbuilt lighting controls, but you know what? I really don't care. I do like the purple quite a bit, like I said. So, yeah. I think that pretty much sums up a good overall view of my software and my hardware here. At least for the most part. But let's finish this all off by giving everything a rating. So, let's turn the stupid autofocus off because, yeah, it decided to activate on me. And let's give my computer here a score. I'm going to score pretty much all my parts and add them all together into one cohesive unit. And the first part I'm going to be reviewing is the motherboard. The ASRock AB350 Pro 4 is a pretty good motherboard with quite a nice amount of features. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 USB 3 slots. No USB 3.1 support here, but I don't care about that. But you also do get a USB Type-C in the back, which is nice. So I do actually have about 9 USB ports in total. That's including the ones on top of the case. So plenty of USB support. Pretty nice featured little thing. Has the ability to take M.2 slots. My last one was able to do the same thing, but this can handle more of them. So, I can actually use more than one, which is pretty nice. Pretty good motherboard. I like it. So, if I had to give that a actual score, I would probably rate it about an 8 out of 10. Yeah, it's pretty good. But do keep in mind that score is relative to what I can do right now. That score can probably raise up to maybe a 9 out of 10. Perhaps not a 10 out of 10, but 9 out of 10 would be nice. But since it's so early in development, yeah, I'm gonna strike that into the record there and knock a couple points off for that. So it's nothing against ASRock. It's just how it is. But once updates start happening, I'm sure it's going to be far better. Anyhow, next thing I'm going to be reviewing is the Asus Dual GTX 1060. 6 gigabyte of DDR5, GDDR5 graphics RAM there. If I had to give that a rating, it would be a solid 10 out of 10. It's very, very good. It was very plug and play. Only thing I had to do was plug it into my computer, and it worked right off the bat. Windows had no issues with it. Linux has no issues with it. Very direct, very simple. So if you used a Linux system, this would be a very good graphics card for you. Especially if you use a more recent distribution, such as maybe Fedora, I'm not too sure. But if you use Linux Mint, yeah, it would work. Manjaro Linux, it would work. So, pretty good. Next up I'm going to be reviewing is the processor itself. The Ryzen 7 1700. altogether would be about 8 out of 10. And if you notice, that's the same score as I'm giving my motherboard. And that's because it suffers from the same thing. Basically, it being in the early stages. And again, I do believe that score could probably rise up with the iterations of new drivers and new things for new firmware. All those things always help in architecture. But since everything's so new, yeah, I'm going to give it a pretty fair 8 out of 10. It only loses points because of its newness. So, if you want something a little bit more tried and true, yeah, perhaps a Intel build will probably be a little bit better for you. But as it stands, if you're willing to skate on, a new technology, then, you know what, this isn't really a bad solution, especially if you're going to be editing videos like I am. For video editor, this is a great processor for that. For gaming, not so much. It gets the same performance of a Core i5, but if you combine gaming and being able to make videos at the same time, yeah, that's where the value of this processor starts paying off. Now, the RAM kits, which is the Crucial Ballistics RAM kit, I'm not going to give a rating to. Neither am I going to give a rating to my hard drives, because those things are superfluous. Those things you kind of need no matter what you did. The motherboard is something you could choose on your own. The processor is something you could choose on your own. Same thing with the graphics card. You could even run a system without a graphics card. But you definitely do need RAM, and you definitely need a hard drive. So, yeah, I'm not going to rate those things. Those are just things so essential. Same thing with the power supply. You need a power supply. You can even use a computer without a case, but you do need a power supply. You do need a hard drive, and you do need memory. So, yeah, I'm not going to rate those things because those things are needed. Yeah, you do need a motherboard, and yes, you do need a processor, But again, those things are subjective, and those things are interchangeable. Those are up to the individual. But, yeah. Still, though, if I had to rate the computer as a whole, as a whole unit, I would give it a 9 out of 10. Yes, it does get a better score than its relative parts, but that's because of the case. I'm adding the score of the case into the score of the overall build, and that's a 9 out of 10. So, yeah, the whole system, as it stands, is a 9 out of 10, and that can only go up. Again, with revising and some improvements to the firmware and all that. So, yeah, overall, very cool system. I do like working with it. Again, I mentioned this, I will be starting gaming here. I am working on getting the Yeti Blue microphone here I have to work better. I'm still getting audio settings just right on it. I'm right on the edge, but I'm close. Since I do not have any soundproofing or anything like that, I have to work with what I have, but I do have a few creative ideas to make this whole thing, work pretty well. So, yeah, hopefully, again, I'll be hearing from you soon, and I'll be seeing you around. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be seeing you again in the future. Bye-bye for now.